Welcome to LPA Presents. I'm your host, Matthew D. Rhodes. Today we're here with local screenwriter and director David Smith. David has worked around West Virginia on several smaller projects which can be found on YouTube. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've got a list of questions I'd like to ask, and we'll try to comment on your answers as time permits. Are you ready?
Okay, sure, yeah.
What inspired you to pursue a career in screenwriting and directing?
Hmm. I, in screenwriting and directing, I've always wanted to do it. Like I've wanted to specifically writing, specifically like I think I've wanted to do it before I knew all the ins and outs of it. Like I remember the development of it. I remember it's like as a kid, drawing TV schedules that would have shows that I liked, but also shows that I wanted to make up. But
Hmm.
like I wanted to be like I was really into Power Rangers as a kid. I really wanted to both be a Power Ranger and make the Power Ranger stories. Like I remember
Yeah.
directing my little brothers into like our own like make believe Power Ranger stories, and it's weird. I've always, I guess, been super into like pop culture and stuff. So I think I remember I watched Friends like before, like way earlier than I should have been watching it. Now it's having that renaissance like on Netflix and everything. But I remember there being like an episode of Friends
Hmm.
where like Chandler and Joey are they're gonna write a movie like the Good Will Hunting guys, and I didn't know Good Will Hunting or Ben Affleck or Matt Damon or anything, but like I I remember like that's a memory I have of seeing that episode and then and putting it together like, oh yeah, okay, so there are people behind the camera making up the stories and stuff. And so like slowly I remember that being a moment realizing that oh, Jim Carrey, even though he might improvise, he doesn't necessarily like make up everything he's saying. There's someone else who does that. So like as I would put that stuff together, once DVDs started becoming huge and like
Hmm.
DVD commentaries, I would devour those and just sort of slowly made that shift from like my dream as a kid wanting to be in front of the camera, making up everything, wanting to be behind it and making, making stuff up.
I was actually happy that they decided to start making behind the scenes featurettes inside of DVDs.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fun to learn.
That was, mhm. I was going to say like DVD commentaries, but also weirdly enough, blooper reels. Like I know bloopers have always been a thing, but
Mhm.
somehow in DVDs that was, I remember being in like, must have been late middle school or something, putting that together when I would see in blooper reels, you see the same scene, through all the different angles, all the different coverage. And that was like as a child when I put it together, like, oh, they're filming the same thing from multiple angles.
Mhm.
And that must be how you make a movie. And like that the first short film I ever did was like an experiment to see if I was right, like about
Mhm.
that. So yeah.
But of course, when it comes to improvising on set, look at Robin Williams. Robin Williams, what they did was they let him riff on a lot of what he did for Aladdin, and then they chose the
Yeah.
best lines and then added it in.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not always about, oh, we're going to write the screenplay and then have people voice the lines or whatnot. It's we're going to
No,
have
that
some
yeah.
context and then let people riff.
Let people go out. And that's what I think, so because of learning it the way I did, I think originally I was never someone, and I always, I don't know, maybe it's just me being a people pleaser or whatever, but I've never been the kind of director who's like, you have to say everything I've written exactly like it is. Like I like it when people would go up. And so that like has definitely, I realized pretty early on that as much as I love writing and got into this through writing, like my favorite stuff whenever I'm filming something tends to be the stuff that's unplanned, either because
Mhm.
someone ad libbed something or really often in the case of my like low to no budget guerrilla filmmaking, it's like we'll be planning to film at a location and it's like, oh, all of a sudden we can't film there that day for whatever reason. So we got to change it to where it's happening outside of the office now, or outside, quickly like rewriting like on the fly like that. Like that's some of my favorite stuff in the movies I've done has been the stuff that you figure out like in the heat of the moment.
Yeah. So what is your favorite movie and why?
Oh man, it's changed over the years, but I think I've always had like a top five that kind of like changes, but I think it probably it's I think it'd be safe to say it's adaptation, the Charlie Kaufman movie.
I'm not
Um,
familiar with that one.
okay, that's do you know Charlie Kaufman at all? He did Being John Malkovich, Eternal Sunshine of the
Yes.
Spotless Mind is the one that most folks know. Yeah, adaptation is it's a movie that he made that he wrote. He was hired to write an adaptation of this nonfiction book called The Orchid Thief, and had a tremendous amount of trouble, like just turning that book into a movie that he was satisfied with. So what
Mm,
he did was he channeled that frustration into the script, and part of it is an adaptation of The Orchid Thief, but the majority of it probably is about like he wrote himself into the script. So Nicolas Cage stars in it as both Charlie Kaufman and Donald Kaufman, his fictional twin brother.
hmm
It was that idea of like I remember like watching the trailer for that and talking to like writer friends of mine of like, can you believe that someone did something this crazy, wrote himself into his story? And I think, the fact that I got into this through writing and like I could relate to it a lot and
hmm
still relate to it throughout the years, just that frustration of the writing process. And it's just so it's a very personal story. Again, talk about things I came out of realized early on is that I write therapeutically or whatever. So just that yeah, it's so personal yet so just wild and it's a spectacle, and yet it's also someone trying to wrestle with his personal demons. So yeah,
Yeah.
adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people tend to write themselves into their scripts in a way.
Yeah.
And how do you typically approach writing a screenplay?
Well, I'm again that there's not a like it's different project to project. There are similarities, and I've also, in addition to film, in addition to like writing, filmmaking,
hmm
I've always been particularly obsessed with productivity books, see
hmm
stuff. So I guess that is to say, I mentioned that because I wish that I did have a one size fits all answer, and I can't seem to stop myself from trying to come up with one. So I'll tell you how it's going now because it's a process that I've sort of, like I said, still in the works, but I'm trying to distill it so that I can get stuff written faster, which is I I have to both outline and write as I'm going. Because
Yeah.
if I try to sit down and make an outline and go right from that, then I don't know. The way I write, I try to get so into the characters that like I know what they're gonna say, and it just I don't think it's ever happened that I've written a script where if I'm going from an outline at some point, it's never happened that I don't that this doesn't happen where I'll write a scene and I know I need to get to the next bullet point in my outline or whatever, and I'm like, no, this guy wouldn't say that. I know this person now. I've spent this many days with this person. The only reason they would say or do this is because I have an index card that says they're supposed to do this. And I can't do that. I
Mhm.
have to then go back to the outline. But the other thing is I can't just build it from nothing. So I do have to like I have to think about the story, and I have to make that either bullet point list or list of cards or whatever, and write a little bit, but then get to that point where it's like, okay, no, I know these people. I know that they would do this differently. And so then I improvise a little bit. In writing, I'll improvise. Like I'll figure out kind of, okay, well, what feels right that would happen next. And then I'll do that until I hit a wall, until I'm like, okay, well now I don't know where to go. And then I'll go back to the outline, redo it some more. So it always has to be kind of back and forth like that. And what I was saying about the process I'm in now, I'm trying to get stuff written faster. So basically, I'm in the middle of starting a new project that I've been thinking about for a long time. So I've spent the past week basically doing kind of R&D, like research, like researching a lot, watching a lot of YouTube videos and documentaries about people that are similar to the characters, periodically taking some notes so that I organize what I'm getting. Next week, I plan to use that stuff that I've been researching today to kind of improvise some potential scenes that I think will happen. I'm hoping that what happens is from those improvised scenes that I write, I have a vague idea of how it's going to open. I have a vague idea of what like kind of is going to happen between Act 1 and Act 2, like the turn that's going to happen. So I'm going to sketch some of that stuff out next week. Hopefully those sketches will allow me to start an outline, and then it'll become that kind of back and forth, outline a little bit, write some, just like I was saying, some.
I mean, it could be worse. I mean, one thing I'm doing is I'm not doing an outline. I'm taking my original concept from my original book, which I'm actually having to rewrite.
Yeah.
And write the screenplay, then go back and rewrite the book, which then affects the screenplay.
Yeah.
So
that's I think that's cool to being able to go back and forth between two different forms. Like I mentioned when we were kind of exchanging emails about setting this interview up that I have I've done a few features, but it's all been a learning process, so they're not all widely available. But I do have my second feature on, and that's about a blogger who he blogs about like every single thing that happens in his life, and it causes a lot of problems with his personal life.
Yeah,
I had that concept, and I had a hard time writing it at first. And what I actually had to do with that, I never released it as anything, but I wrote like not every, because he's been blogging his whole life, so I didn't write every blog he's ever made. But for the course of the movie, I wrote it essentially like a first person novel. I wrote like his blog entries, and then from those blog entries I had written, I was able to like kind of say like, okay, well, this will be voiceover, but then this will be something where instead of like his blog in the movie, we'll just see this acted out,
Yeah.
So I think you gain a lot from switching between forms of media like that.
Could you walk us through the process of making a film from concept to release?
I mean, yeah, I can walk you through how I've done it, which isn't always the right way to do it.
Yeah.
But I've because it's like I said, I've done indie projects, and that when I say indie projects, I mean guerrilla style, like yeah. So I'm a writer first. I write the script, and actually, for not everyone has to do like this kind of stuff, but I feel it's important to point that out, just because I'm a big proponent of finding what works for you. But what works for me is, okay, so getting the script to a point where you're happy with it. Which again, there's lots of things I could talk about even when it goes into that. But when we're talking about from that to making a movie, I mean, a lot of screenplay, I mean, a lot of filmmaking books even will not go into like kind of the bare bones stuff of it. One thing I'll say is, lots of books tell you to do a storyboard which I mean is great if and you're an animator, so you've worked in animation, so that may work for you as someone who
Yeah.
draws. I don't like, I get frustrated with the drawing and it takes me forever, but I'm a writer. So what I do is essentially a written shot list, a written
Mm.
storyboard. I will write down, uh, what I'll actually do is write down I'll get down to the minutia of like every cut in the movie, like
Mhm.
okay, in each scene, I want to be on this angle for this line of dialogue, and then on this angle for this line of dialogue, which takes a lot of time to do, but it's worth it because then you can use that to reverse engineer and say, okay, well, how many setups do I need to get what I've written down? How many, and that's important, I think, because we were talking about like the beauty of improvisation with your
Mhm.
actors and
Yeah.
everything. So um, that's something I again learned pretty early on is try to do as few setups as, like, try to film. And again, this doesn't work for animation, but like at least for live action, like if you can figure out what cuts you need, but then reverse engineer that to figure out how many shots, like,
Mm.
and try to do as few shots as possible, so that way, because I mean, I've acted before too, so I just know if we're only recording a line or two, you lose momentum.
Yeah.
So you use your written storyboard or your actual storyboard to figure out like what's the fewest amount of setups you can do. Anyway, I'm getting lost in the in the fine details of that. But getting so that is the next step though for me is, I mean, I'm a big, pre-production will save you like, all kinds of trouble. So figure out how many shots you need. From that, you can figure out how long it's going to take to film each scene. Um, then make yourself a bunch of lists,
Mhm.
list every character that's in the movie, every location, every piece of wardrobe, and as you can build a team together, you can get people you can delegate this to. But whether you're doing it yourself or someone else is, it's the next step after the script writing, after the shot list, is just that list making, that figuring out what do I need if I don't have this. What's the barrier between making this piece of paper uh, something that I can watch on my
Mhm.
TV screen, and just get really fastidious about, like every little detail of what you need. Then you can start figuring out like how much is it going to cost? How do I don't know. This may sound very overwhelming to like some folks, but
Mhm.
for me, it's the only way to do. If I don't have and if you have that checklist of all the different little pieces that you need, then it also makes it easier to figure out like, oh, what things can I like join together? Can I like how can I cut costs or cut, like, do these two locations really need to be two different locations, or can I combine things to make it,
Mhm.
both more cost effective, more, easier on the actors, easier on the people. So just figuring out everything you need so that when you're filming, you're not just trying to figure out on the set,
Yeah.
Yeah. Then, you know, shoot, shooting, building your puzzle pieces that you need for editing, and you know,
But isn't that why they have the marker at the beginning of each scene? Make it easier on editing?
yeah, yeah, yes, and there's a point there to be of like, and especially if you're working with an editor who's not yourself.
Mhm.
That's the thing that I guess I haven't, like, on all the indie stuff I've done, like I've done stuff where I've pretty much I'm getting to the point where I want to work more with a crew, where I'm realizing, oh, I can't do everything. A lot of the things I don't like in my projects are a result of me trying to do everything. But
Yeah.
up to this point, I have like written, directed, and edited. So because I know I'm going to be the one editing, and because I'm not working with necessarily a professional crew all the time, yeah,
Mhm.
we'll use a marker, but the only reason we'll use a marker is because, oh, that's what you do in a movie. But like, we don't, if we wrote the stuff, but I'm not saying not to write the stuff down,
Mhm.
because if you do, you'll save yourself a lot of time when it comes to editing. I don't always, but that's just because I know, like, when I'm editing, I organize the file names by like what take and stuff, but I do it like all after the fact. I guess just because I'm trying to, if I'm honest, it's probably just because I'm trying to get people, both the cast and crew that I am working with, in and out as quickly as possible that day.
Right.
Because I haven't gotten to pay. I want to pay people. I haven't. It's all been volunteer up to this point. So,
Mhm.
just trying to be respectful of people's time. So,
I understand that one.
you know,
So how important do you find research to do or to be when writing a screenplay?
I find it very important. Um, I just also think I think there is a balance between getting all that you need for research, and, at least for me, using it as a procrastination tool, because that's the thing, is, like I said, I've been researching this new project, and so it feels kind of like when you're watching a movie in class at school, because it's like, all right, this is the fun week. I just get to sit down and have snacks and watch documentaries. I am learning, and it is. If I didn't do this, I wouldn't have the stuff. But I know that on past projects I've been guilty of, I think, probably trying to do more research than I need to, because the only thing is, like, you'll never know everything.
Mhm.
You need to know enough, but you also, like, it's a combination of intaking information and creatively, reconstructing that, and also just being creative, using
Mhm.
your imagination, and yeah, figuring out, like, okay, well, how can I combine everything that I've read, watched, and listened to about this subject with my own experiences, and with just the magic of, like, man, my favorite thing. I mentioned that on my movies, my favorite thing is the stuff that I didn't write down.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to focus more on just screenwriting, so that, even as I was saying that, I was thinking, like, am I going to lose that? But I'm not really, because my favorite thing, I think, when I'm writing, and I don't know if you experience this too, but I feel like most writers do, is when you write something and you're like, I don't know where that came from. Like, most of my favorite lines in my movies that I've written,
Mhm.
they're the lines where, like, I don't know, I couldn't sit down and, like, a math problem, like, come up with this line or something. It just came because I got that momentum. I was writing, and then suddenly this character said this thing, and a lot of times it's something that, like, I would never say. So yeah, it's that, research is very important, though, because it does, if you're not researching, for one thing, things aren't going to be authentic. And I know, just as an audience member, that really bothers me when I'm watching a movie and I realize that, like, oh, I don't think this person has any idea, like, what it's like to do this job, or
Mhm.
to be in this place, or whatever. So it's important for authenticity, but it's just also important to, I think, maybe, at least for myself, continuously ask myself, all right, do I have enough? Which, that's the thing. Like, I'm lucky that I don't want to talk too much about it, just because I don't think I'll do it if I talk too much about it. But
Mhm.
I'm writing a horror film set in the world of productivity and life hacking and everything. So I already know a lot about it, and I've spent the last week reading a lot about, and refreshing myself. And I realize that I do think I'm at the point where, okay, I've refreshed myself enough. Next week, I'm going to start sketching out some scenes, and through that, I will find out uh, what I do know and what I don't, what I just think I know, and then I may do some more research after that, after experimenting and finding out how much I actually if I do know enough to write it.
Yeah, but have you thought about, a horror film based on the folklore of West Virginia? I mean, that's a good source of
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually do any of those stories in movie format.
I know there's some that exist. Well, I know the big one. I've never watched it, but the Mothman Chronicles, the Richard Gere movie. Yeah, so there's at least been one big budget studio movie about the West Virginia cryptid. And
Mhm.
I know I've seen some ads for some other indies about the Mothman. I know at one point there were a group of filmmakers in the state who were working on a horror film about the Flatwoods monster.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's a market for it. I just went to the Mothman Festival for the first time, last year, and yeah, yeah, people love their West Virginia cryptids.
But I'm talking like the Telltale Lilac Bash, those stories.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've never read it, but I know I've seen it like at Tamarack and everything.
Mhm.
So yeah, no, that's probably very fertile ground for me. For me, it would have to be like the reason I'm trying to work on this horror thing is I'm trying to focus on screenwriting, trying to focus on. I don't want to write something just because I know that it will sell,
Mhm.
but when it comes to things that are marketable, I know I've certainly watched. I'm not a big like horror guy, but my fiance is very into horror. I've started watching more because of her, um, and I've seen in that there are movies where I'm like, okay, I liked this one because this one has themes that I care about and stuff.
Mhm.
So within that world, is there something that I connect to? So for me, or for I think a lot of writers out there, it would be within that book of stories that you're talking about, within
Mhm.
West Virginia folklore, with any of that. Like, is there something that like you either that you personally connect to enough to motivate you to sit down for as long as you need to take to write a screenplay because it can be a slog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What challenges have you faced while directing a film?
So I've faced a lot because I got into like everything other than writing when it comes to filmmaking. I got into out of necessity, just because I
Mhm.
wanted to see my work on a screen. So I'm very introverted. I've come a long way, but I still deal with a lot of anxiety. So I working with people like you have to when you're directing on a set is just it's not it's a big challenge for me to be able to overcome.
Mhm.
um I mean, that's probably the biggest one is just working with people. Just well, I just mentioned, it's a hard thing to admit, but I should. There's no reason why I shouldn't be writing the scene and take number down on a marker. That's like film 101. You don't even have to be I didn't go to film school or anything. You don't even have to go to know that that's something you should do. But again, like I said, if I had to really admit why I don't, it's probably because I just want to try to make things go faster.
Mhm.
So that's a challenge, and a challenge that I think I have overcome in realizing that, I want to pay people, and I haven't really had the means to do that on a project yet.
Yeah.
But I think it is realizing if I'm not paying people, realizing that, like, hey, these are people who are like volunteering to work on your project. They wouldn't be here if they didn't care about it. So, like,
Right.
trusting yourself to be like, okay, you can do more than one take. And I do more than one take. But I mean, realizing that, like, okay, we can be here a while. We don't have to like I look at directing, and I want to continue to do this, but I just don't want to have the movie suffer for it. But I do almost look at directing like I'm hosting a party.
Mhm.
Like I want everyone to have what they need to do a good job and not be miserable.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what it gets. The challenges come when things are happening that are making people miserable, because it always inevitably happens if you're working on a movie. Like, and if
Hmm.
you're working on a longer project, it's more likely to happen because it's more days, it's more sets, whatever, you know.
Right.
I've done a lot of the movies I've done have actually been for what they call these like 72-hour film festivals. If people have listened to previous episodes of your show, I was actually just listening to one where they were mentioning to you a 48-hour film project. It's
Hmm.
a lot of places in the country that do these like 48-hour film projects. I guess the ones locally, they figure, we need the extra day, so they've been like 72-hour films. But what they'll do is they'll give you at a certain starting point, they give you like a couple of prompts, so that they know that this wasn't a movie that you made before, that you're just submitting this thing. Like, they give you like a couple of things that you have to include in the movie, and then you have literally 3 days to write, shoot, and edit that whole movie.
Yeah.
Um, you were asking me about challenge, or what's so that's, and I was talking about keeping people happy, or but I guess that's the thing, is I guess people in those 72-hour film contests, they realize more that, oh, this is a time crunch, so people are maybe a little more forgiving. But all right, I know I give kind of long-winded answers here, but the succinct answer for this is finding the balance between keeping your cast and crew happy and not letting the quality of the movie suffer, you know?
Right. What advice would you give to someone who is interested in pursuing a career in screenwriting or directing?
Um, let's see. I would say it should be such a simple answer, but okay. What I'll say is you are actually given this advice, like I on one of the episodes that I was just reviewing a little earlier this morning. But I will say, just start doing it, but with the caveat, with the added thing of figure out what works for you. You know,
Hmm.
that's the biggest thing for me, is that, because I did, like, I remember, to me, when I was a kid, I thought like, oh, filmmaking is this big thing. It's so complicated. I could never do something like that, because I wrote a lot of short stories and stuff, like, at first. And I remember they used to have in Charleston, in the capital of West Virginia here, they used to have this, what was called the West Virginia International Film Festival student film competition.
Hmm.
Um, and they had a table at the book fair, at the book festival in Charleston. So I remember going up to that table, and they had information about their student film competition, and I was like, "How are you supposed to just make a movie?" And the guy at the table, I don't know who it was, but he was just like, "Oh, it's not that hard. You just, get some friends together, throw up a light or two." And it is a lot more complicated than that. But that guy saying that was like, "All right, I guess it is." So I tried it. This is the thing, though. I tried it, and I read it, because I big if I'm going to do something, I tend to do like all the research on it that I can do.
Hmm.
So, like, and I think that's what intimidated me maybe at first. I think maybe I actually had read a few film books before that
Yeah.
and thought like, God, they got like contracts in here, and they have like, this is all way above my head or whatever. Um, but I tried it. As I did it, I was able to like recognize things from those filmmaking books. But, oh, that's what this guy was talking about when he used that word that I couldn't understand. And then there were certain things that I tried, and I realized, like, it was probably storyboarding, and I'm not the only one to have ever done a written shot list, but I came to that by myself. um I didn't read about it somewhere, and that was because I tried storyboarding at first, and I was like,
Hmm.
this is taking too much time away, and I think I know how to get the result that storyboarding is supposed to give without doing the part of it I don't like, and then came up with the technique that did work for me. So it's a lot of experimentation, trying, not being afraid that if you're not doing something the way it tells you to in a filmmaking book, that you're doing things the wrong way, just trial and error, read lots of screenplays that's related to the trial and error, because you know you submit, if you ask for like feedback on screenplays, you get a lot of feedback that like says like, oh, this isn't formatted this way, this is supposed to be here or there. And then you start reading scripts and you realize that some of the greatest like award-winning scripts, you read a Coen Brothers script, those are formatted like way different than than most screenplay books will tell you to format it. So
Yeah.
you just kind of have to, but there's a point to the formatting, but you kind of have to figure out like, okay, what works for me, what allows me to get this thing done. And if there's a piece of advice that everyone says to do that you just can't seem to follow, but you know another way to get that result, not being afraid to do that too.
What are some of your favorite filmmaking techniques or directors that have inspired you?
Filmmaking techniques and directors. Let's see. I don't have an answer right off the cuff, but it may be informed by what we've talked about so far. But we've talked about improvising, letting the actors going, letting the spontaneity kind of inform the work that you're doing, and that's something that and a lot of people love them, a lot of people hate them, but like that became, or not, people were doing it before that, but Judd Apatow and a lot of his movies, and Adam McKay, these like comedy directors, they're very famous for doing a take that is scripted, but then letting the cast just like go off.
Yeah.
So that's a technique that I think is making sure that you've got what you need, because that sucks to get in the editing room and be like, oh man, there's no way to piece this. We had a lot of fun on set, but there's no way to make this something that makes sense. Getting what you need, but then getting something that you don't necessarily need, but might be the thing that like kind of pushes it over the edge. So that technique wise, I know lots of other directors do this, but just again, like I said, even though I know that I need to like balance the people pleasing with the quality of the movie, I still think that a priority needs to be keeping the people happy, being very respectful of people's time. I've been on a lot of sets with like filmmakers that I'm friends with or I admire, but like, man, you're there all late into the night when you don't need to be. And just like trying to be respectful of when you're doing setups, just thinking about like, okay, what if I've got a bunch of extras, can I maybe shoot the scenes with the extras all first so that I can let them go and then move into just being mindful of people's time. And that's a good technique, and that helps, because especially doing indie stuff, like that's how you get people to want to come back and keep working on your projects is if people know they have a good time working on your thing, then both they'll return to subsequent projects and they'll tell people they know. So then you get your network of people that can work on your stuff even wider. The beauty of spontaneity and be nice to people.
Of course, there's a difference between volunteer work and paid work, considering if you were to do paid work, you wouldn't have to worry too much about people's time.
True, yeah. But I think you still want to, you don't want people to be like, oh man, this guy's miserable to work for, but at least the check cleared.
Right.
So, and you were talking about film. Did you ask about filmmakers that I admire? Too in that, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot, and there's Paul Thomas Anderson's a big one, and that's before I work on any like feature film. I always watched the making of documentary of Magnolia, of one of his movies, but that said, that was a very intense project for him. So I watched that both because it's kind of cool. I guess technique-wise, you can see like there's a really funny scene in that where he's pretending to be the camera and going through, but then there's a lot of times where it's a good example of what not to do when it comes to, again, like there's times where the the people are pretty miserable in a way that I think, maybe doesn't affect the performance that well and stuff. So.
Mm-hmm.
The PTA is a good one. I mentioned the Coen brothers. They're awesome. Charlie Kaufman. Greta Gerwig is probably one of my new favorites. So.
I'm actually fond of the Wachowskis.
Oh, yeah, of course. I don't know. I guess I haven't watched as many up there behind the scenes stuff or really even seen any interviews, but I know I love everything of theirs that I've seen. So
could you give an example of a scene or moment in one of the films that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, scene or moment in a movie. I don't know why I keep restating this. Is it?
I know. But your own personal work.
Yeah. I mean, a scene or moment, we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually not why, because there's a movie I'm prouder of than this, but okay, so that second feature that I have up on YouTube, the only feature I have up on YouTube, Escribitionist, it's called. There is a scene in that in which the main character, he goes with, I think it's the love interest in the movie. They go to a class where it's just PowerPoint presentations. It was based on a class that a computer class I had where you could just do a PowerPoint presentation about anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember it was based on that class, like in real life. It was based on I remember and I put this directly into that scene. This happened in real life where some older gentleman in the class who really didn't know much about computers or anything. I don't know how he did this, but there was a transition between slides in the PowerPoint where it was just a giant baby's face that zoomed in and then zoomed out. And he was like, I don't know what that is or how that happened. It was so funny and ridiculous. It was one of those things that you say oh, you can't write this. You can't you couldn't make it up, but it did happen. But I wrote it after it happened and then built a scene around, tried to reverse engineer it. How can I get this to happen in my story? And so that happens in it, but there's also a bunch of other things that happen in that scene. I had a lot of fun making up the fake PowerPoint presentations.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole sequence where she's in another market now, but we had a local meteorologist, Marina Jurica, here in Huntington. I just had this one character in the class who my little brother played have this weird obsession with her and do this whole PowerPoint presentation about how he wanted to get her to marry him. That's in there. So I think, and a friend of mine was just mentioning that scene to me the other day as one of her favorites in any of my movies. And I was like, oh, that was good because I like how it fit in the story, I think. I mean, I guess that's subjective, but I feel like it fit, but it was also just this ridiculous, almost digression. But I was that's my favorite thing is when I can take ridiculous moments from my life and fit them into a story. So that's probably, there might be others. There's others similar to that, but that's one I can pinpoint at least.
Yeah. Now, how do you approach casting and what do you look for in actors when you film?
So that's been something that has changed based on, how big the project is, because a lot of times when especially when it's a 72-hour film contest type deal, or even if it's just a no budget sketch or video, even actually in the features up until the point I'm at now, it's always been friends. I'm the kind of person who, I know other filmmakers who are this way also, but anytime I go to a place, anytime I meet someone, I can't even help it. Part of me is thinking oh, what would it be like if this person was was in a movie? You know, what would it be like if this place was in a movie or whatever? But I do that with people. And hey, luckily, just through getting to know other filmmakers, but also as a writer, they're not really doing things as regularly, but there's kind of a big like stand-up scene in Huntington. There's a big stand-up scene in Morgantown also. So this is something
Yeah.
you might look at. Like I know a lot of stand-up comedians, and a lot of times because they like to perform anyway, you know, they're down to like be in videos like that. So how I approach casting a lot of times is, you know, just the fact that I have an idea anyway, just based on people I know who I've
Mhm.
met. And so you ask them and you know, it helps if they're a comedian or an actor already. But I've definitely had moments where like um I've asked people who are, you know, maybe not necessarily a traditional actor, but they might have done community theater or
Mhm.
really enjoyed being in their high school play or something. And I think like I don't really love all the technical stuff when it comes to directing, but I do love working with actors, working on performances. And I think training helps a lot with acting, but I think
Mhm.
also if someone has an interest in doing it, I mean, this is not a catch-all. There's some people who probably would love to do it and just for whatever reason can't.
Mhm.
But um, I think you can do. If you direct enough, if you have a good enough connection with someone, you can get good performances out of non-traditional actors.
Yeah.
So I'll just say, up until this point, it's been asking friends and finding people who both fit the character and are just excited and reliable. Um, but I did. So I don't know. Like I've had movies fall apart before, and I had it happen recently. You know, I was
Mhm.
planning on doing a big feature last year that just did not happen for a multitude of reasons. But for that one, we did a casting call. It's not the first time I've ever done a casting call, but like that I haven't done a project since then. But
Mhm.
even though that is kind of back to the drawing board right now, that's still the most recent project I've been involved with, and so we did a casting call for that. And I think that's with that. What I did was I there's a lot of speaking parts in that, but um, I took the five characters that had the most lines,
Mhm.
and you know, we would have people. I mean, I can get bare bones with it. We knew that those were the scenes that people would be reading, and when we called people to casting call, my fiance helped us with like screening people out in the
Mhm.
lot. Like we were lucky enough to like have a you know, have an office where the auditions were held, and then
Yeah.
kind of a screening area out there. So she would meet with the people as they would fill in their like sign-in sheets and everything, and then she would be able to come in and say like, "Hey, I think they might be good for this scene." But we still made all the sides available to everybody, so it was ultimately their decision. Like we,
Yeah.
a lot of times, though, just in that situation, someone's nervous or whatever, you know, because they're there. So if they had a part that they wanted to read for pretty strongly, we would let them do that. But still, I think if there was a difference between what they wanted to read for and what we thought they'd be good for,
Mhm.
we would then have them go ahead and read the part that, you know, that we thought they'd be good for. So,
Yeah.
so.
Makes me wonder how I'm going to go about getting voice actors here in West Virginia. It's like
Yeah,
I could either try and hire locally or I could have people
yeah.
work remotely.
Yeah, yeah. That's I mean, I think if you have the time and resources to do it, it might be worth doing both
Mhm.
because my guess is that you would get more you know, you'd be able to cast a wider net by getting people remotely for something like that. But it might be worth seeing you found any local folks just because it would be something I think worth trying that idea of like um I know there's a different tone in your
Mhm.
project just from what little I know about it, but there's still if you were in the situation where improvising or kind of, you know, where there might be a different connection you might feel as a director, being able to be like, having that contact with that face-to-face contact with them. So yeah, if it was me, I would probably want to try it both ways.
Well, the problem is with Morgantown, I don't know if you have the same issue in Huntington, considering Huntington has a college, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marshall University's here. Yeah.
Well, considering WVU is here, how many of them would be students, and how many of them would be able to stay for long periods after school lets out?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I know in Huntington we have a lot of folks who live off campus, and I mean that's me. I grew up 2 hours away from Huntington in Oak Hill, West Virginia, but I mean I stayed here because it's when I first got an apartment, got that taste of independence or whatever. Like, and I know there's a lot of folks like me who just, end up sticking around and staying through the summer and stuff because, so I don't know how it is in Morgantown if there's a lot of folks like that, but I guess that's the thought too, though, is that if you might find that connection with them personally, but because they don't have to be with you directly, if it turns into a remote thing later, then that's a possibility too, So.
Yeah, considering Morgantown is like a ghost town during the summer.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What are some common mistakes that new filmmakers make, and how can they avoid them?
Some of it I think I've talked about already, but just to get back on is the importance of pre-production. That's kind of like I said, I just recently had a big project kind of fall apart, at least for the time being. And one of the most embarrassing things was that afterwards, everyone was like, everyone was very understanding when I explained to them what was going on with it, but they were also like, yeah, just pre-production's important. And I wanted to be like, oh, I know it is. I did so much pre-production. but even though that had, as bad as things were, like it would have been way worse if I hadn't done as much planning as I did. And that's something I see a lot of people do. A lot of people just think like, oh, I'll just show up and things will just fall into place, and it doesn't. You have to have a plan.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people, and God, I get very envious when I see, but there are some people who are just a lot better at flying by the seat of their pants, but I'm not one of them. And that's the thing, is I see a lot of filmmakers, like, you get there on set and you kind of know immediately, you're like, oh, this person just wrote the script. They don't know when we're going to start shooting what. And it just, like, I feel like if nothing else, even if the plan completely changes, having a plan means that you're going to show up. As nervous as you'll show up a lot more confidently than you will without a plan. So that's the thing. It's just, and if you don't show up with that confidence, I've been on sets where it happens. We're just like, it just, everyone kind of knows, like, oh my God, I don't know what this thing is going to be. And things go off the rails pretty quickly. So, pre-production, and again, it's nothing new, but it's just like being mindful of people. Like, yeah, I've just been on lots of sets where we were there longer, and I mean, I know, like I was saying also, that we probably need to be a little longer on my sets, that to get the quality of it. But if you are, God, it makes me send that. I won't say what it was or who it was, but I just remember being on this set specifically where they had this big, and it was a first-time filmmaker, so that's why this happened. But like, it was a huge crowd of extras, and they shot like all of the close-ups first. You couldn't see an extra in the background at all. Like, you could see the way they had their cameras set up, that like, you have all these people standing around all day. It was hot. It was an exterior scene, and they're filming scenes with the actors that, like, and again, I'm a filmmaker, so that's the only reason I knew, like, oh, there's a different way to do this. But like, it just frustrated me so much that, like, we're all standing back there, and then they don't get to our shot until, like, much later in the day, when you could have shot the scenes with all the crowd and then the crowd could have left.
Mhm.
And then, you get the people. So just little stuff like that, just being mindful and connecting. I think rehearsals are good too. A lot of people, you don't always have time or money to do it,
Mhm.
but like that falls in line with pre-production, but it's something that I think some people might miss. I guess that was the question, is what do I see a lot of filmmakers not do? And it's no rehearsals. I think
Mhm.
even if you don't rehearse the script, but you should do, because it's helpful to do that, but just meeting with the actors, even the crew, like beforehand, so that you can build that rapport with them,
Yeah.
so that it's not the first time that you're going over anything when you're on, because when you're on the set, God, there's a million, you got to talk, you got to like deal with all of these things that you just, the location was this way before and now it's this way. So all these little things always pop up. So if you're having to deal with those little things on top
Mhm.
of building a rapport with your cast and crew, then you could save that time by just having a meeting and just rapport building and stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for taking time out
Okay,
of your busy schedule.
of course, yeah.
If you'd like to
Thank you
get into the
for
industry,
yeah,
I hope we can actually do this again.
yeah, of course.
If you'd like to get into the entertainment industry, check us out each month as I interview industry professionals and newcomers alike, from actors and directors to crew members and the occasional author. We post each episode on the first or second of each month. Stay tuned.